Hello, Dr. Schuder. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Leanne, thank you for having me. And to everybody who views us, I just want to say hello and thankful for all that you do to bring care and kindness into the world.
Thank you. Same to you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, this podcast and this conversation feels really important, especially to the age group of my listeners who might be caring for parents or family members that are aging. And what do we call it, where we're sandwiched in between raising kids and helping elderly parents, where this is like a more common thing at this age. And it can be a real interesting experience, let's say, because family is already can be an interesting dynamic. But also, we're working with older family members or parents who are used to taking care of us. They are not used to being in this role. And so the role of the caregiver is sometimes not natural for those of us doing it. Sometimes we don't actually even have time to do it. And what can happen, and what I've seen in my own friend circle, is that it really takes a toll on the person doing the caregiving because it's a lot of work. And so I really wanted to have you on today to talk about how we can self-care for ourselves. So feel free to jump right in. I will turn the floor over to you in that way, and that I'd love your insight on what are we actually doing here as caregivers, and what's our role.
Yeah. So you ask, what do we call that? Sandwich between young family, between caring for elder parents. We call that exhausting and stressful. At least that's what I call it, because I'm there, I understand it, and it is really exhausting and stressful at times, especially for those of us who really care about others. And it's so easy for those of us who are helpers naturally to give up too much of ourselves to the point where we become exhausted, and it's really hard for us to even take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So this is the work I'm doing. I am a mother. I am a grandmother now. Yay!
Wow.
But I am a
Congratulations.
spouse, and I am also the eldest daughter of aged parents. And my husband's parent has also had a lot of health problems. But I've also been a lifelong professional caregiver, as I used to work with severely multiply handicapped or special needs children. And then also as a pastor and working through nonprofits to help people. So the research I've done has been to try to help figure out, how do we make this caregiving role more sustainable, and how do we increase resilience to be able to handle the challenges that seem to constantly confront us.
Yes. Important, really important work. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, because it's too easy to think of the intensity of other people's needs and then to just to put our own needs to the side, because other people are having to deal with so much stuff. But that becomes problematic. And because I know this is one of the things I teach about is burnout, but also compassion fatigue and secondary traumatic stress. And that's vicarious traumatization, and it does affect us over time. So everything that I teach is about helping people to prevent and counter burnout and compassion fatigue so that we can be healthier caregivers, because it's so important not only for our own well-being, but the people that we help benefit from our well-being, our families benefit, and we can teach healthier caregiving to our children, our grandchildren, and to the other generations of caregivers coming up into the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's start there, because let's assume we're women taking care of our elderly parents or in-laws or uncle, aunt, family member. We are already potentially at compassion fatigue. I love that phrase because it really sums up what we can experience, especially after years and years of caring for children, may or may not have a supportive spouse. And then we have elderly family members that need our attention. We might also be working full time. So we are already, I mean, just in your introduction of yourself, how many hats you wear. And I could give you just as many hats that I wear. And I know all of the women that I know have just as many.
Mhm.
And so here we are putting on another hat that we're not qualified for. We have no experience in. We're not even really sure what we're dealing with. We may or may not have outside help. And so we may already be at compassion fatigue. So if maybe we could start there with, let's assume this is not a long game of getting there, but we may already be there. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say to folks that are struggling is that you are human, and it's totally human and normal to struggle when there's ongoing pressures and challenges. And probably the most important thing that I want to tell every single one of you is that you deserve the care and compassion that everyone that you help receives. That you deserve the care and compassion that you are so willing and free to give to others. So don't lose sight of that, because that can lead us to a very dangerous place.
Yeah. And that taps into our worthiness to also receive, not just give. And that is a really tough one because that's not typically modeled or taught to us that we need help too. We're not just the helper, but we need the help. So what do we do if we are the helper and we need help?
Well, we need to recognize that we are human, and that as humans, we not only have beauty and blessings and gifts to share in abundance, and that includes our kindness and care, but we also have limitations to what we can do and give. There's a lot that is outside our control, but it's also, we only have a limited amount of resources to be able to use, and that includes our time, our energy, emotional, physical energy. All of the resources that we have are finite. And
Mhm.
so one of the important things to do is to understand that as humans, we have those limitations, but it also means that we need to let go of perfectionism and not let shame get in the way of asking for help.
Yeah.
And it's really important to be able to do that, and to do that with safe people. So to be able to offer help to others, there's also that really that is part that is really important, and that is the ability to be able to ask for help. I know that's really hard for me, and so it's something we really have to work on. Self-compassion is also a very important component, and compassion is noticing suffering accompanied by the desire to alleviate that suffering,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So self-compassion is noticing our own suffering and then responding to that with care and kindness,
Yeah.
rather than with harsh judgment or feeling like we're not enough. An example I have is when I do ongoing work in Honduras, and have for 10 years, and I spent at least an hour on one trip with a woman who was sharing and just the awful abuse she was enduring in her marriage. And I was trying to explain the different pieces of abuse. And she said, well, maybe now my husband has a job and it will get better. But his job was as a prison guard, and he then had a gun. And so her comment before saying, I know the next time he gets mad at me, he's going to kill me. And so I tried to tell her, you need to leave your husband, you need to leave your home, you need to find a safe place for you and your young daughter to be. And it was a really tough reality that she lived in. I did what I could. I knew that was very limited. And I left that time of trying to help her feeling just very limited, very broken myself, not being able to do what I really would like to do to help her.
Yeah.
And it was offering the kindness towards myself, saying, oh, Karen, you're suffering, and give myself a hug, recognize that I'm sad, and that's okay, for a time, to say kind words to myself rather than judge myself, and to let go of what is not mine to carry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really profound, actually, to have that kind of self-reflection and be able to give yourself that grace that we are all so readily available to give to others, but we have such a hard time turning it around to ourselves. And what I
Right.
hear a lot coming out of our mouths is, oh, I don't have it as bad as other people, so who am I to complain? And I think that's a really, it does a lot of disservice to us when we decide that our suffering is not equal to others' suffering. Of course, there's so many different versions of suffering, but suffering is suffering. And when
Mhm.
you are, you are. And it does take its toll on us. Are there ways, if we are in a caretaking relationship, that we can, so we may not have whole weekends off, we may not have more than a couple of hours off at a time. How does self-care look in that time that we do have?
Oh, I think we can be really creative about how we take care of ourselves, and it's individualistic as to what really nourishes each one of us.
Mhm.
The important thing is to know that, right? To know what really feeds you, what really nourishes you, and to be very intentional about making sure that happens on a daily basis, because it's so easy to let other things fill up that time.
Mhm.
But it starts with recognizing that that time is really important and that there's incredible value to that time. Not only does it feel good, but it improves every aspect of our lives, and it increases the resilience we have to handle challenges. So not only does it help each day feel better, but it also helps us to face the challenges with more hope and perspective. We just have more reserve and strength and peace within, that we can face those difficult situations.
Mhm. Yeah. This is really important because I think one of the, well, you can tell me whether or not this is true. One of the important things when we're caring for others is keeping ourselves in check, being able to actually have sincere control over our emotions. And a caregiving
Mhm.
situation is like riddled with anxiety. It's just riddled with all of the triggers, especially if you're dealing with family members or parents. It can just be a
Mhm.
like a landmine, a minefield. What am I trying to say? It could be a minefield, and you're just not sure, especially if somebody's not feeling well, not just elderly, but not feeling well. And here we are in a world that's already just chock full of anxiety, reasons to lose sleep. And so I know we're getting creative with how we're self-caring, but it sounds like a lot of what we're talking about is mindset versus environmental, because sometimes we can't change the environment. We have to change what's happening internally. Can you speak to that, like external versus internal input around kind of keeping our own peace?
Yeah, I definitely can. Um, when we create inner peace, and that is just being able to grow calm within, and we can do that so many different ways. But when we do that, we can also help ourselves withstand a lot of the anxiety that's coming at us. And it's really important to understand that anxiety is a social concept. It is not something that just happens to each one of us, but anxiety is happening through societies, and it's global, it's around the world. it is not going to decrease until there are enough people who make the effort to decrease anxiety. It's going to just continue to raise. And in our lives, anxiety across the different roles that we have adds up, right? So if we have an anxious situation at home, that's going to obviously affect us at work, or vice versa. Or if we're watching the news and we get anxious about what's happening in the world, that's going to influence every other part of our lives. Anxiety is a part of our self-preservation. And so if some anxiety we need, but chronically high levels, as we all know, are not sustainable. So if we do things to increase the inner peace, whether it's meditate, practice mindfulness, pray, walk the dog, go out in nature. I walk my golden retriever in the woods, and that can help bring me a lot of peace. There's all those things that we can do. The other big piece that I really have found helpful and encourage people is identifying what is core to who we are. So the important values, virtues, and a purpose. When we know that most mature part of who we are, what's really important, then we have those pressures still coming at us, but they don't have as much influence as they do otherwise. And so we become more purpose-minded. We become more focused on being able to respond in ways that that have integrity. So we can still go to sleep at night rather than just responding emotionally. So when we identify that core part of who we are and we keep that in mind, that can substantially decrease the amount of anxiety that we experience.
Yeah, boy, you've said some really important and amazing things there that I really relate to. I used to chronically skate up against mild panic attacks and anxiety because I was always trying to control everything. I always was trying to, I wanted people to behave a certain way, or I wanted certain things to happen a certain way for me. But you can't control other people, and you can't control life to an extent. The only thing that I learned that I can control is me. So then I was like, well, how do I want to experience life? And that's when I started learning how to tap and meditate. And it wasn't that meditation was really for the function of quieting my mind. It was actually getting to know my mind. I was like, what are the thoughts actually going through my head, and where are they coming from? And so it was a real journey around figuring out where my anxiety came from and why I was housing it. And I was really surprised that it wasn't like a disorder or a condition. It was quite literally my relationship with my life. And so when I changed my relationship with my life, it didn't matter anymore what was on the news, and it didn't matter anymore, for the most part, what my spouse said. There was, like you say, I'm still human, but like a dramatic decrease in reactivity in me about the world around me, because I was handling my own inner peace through these modalities of meditation and tapping and breathing and yoga and all these things. And what it was doing was getting me back into my own body. And when I was able to feel present in the moment, in that breath or in my body, the anxiety naturally decreased. And so I just began to, it was really became a habit to practice how to decrease my anxiety. It was like my job, because I was so reactive. It was making me ill. It was also making me not very nice to be around with my family. And so you've said so many incredible and important and full of, so much is full of truth there around how we can regulate ourselves even in difficult situations, because the difficult situations aren't going away. Right?
Right. And what you're talking about is a concept that I teach in this sustainable caring and promoting resilience and just decreasing anxiety. It's called self-differentiation. And in its most basic sense, it is simply honoring that we are different. And it looks at the two forces in our lives being the need to be a distinctive individual and needing to be in connection with each other. And how we understand those two very important things really can influence how we experience anxiety.
Yeah.
By understanding who we are as individuals, we differentiate ourselves from others. I mean, it doesn't mean we cut others off. It doesn't mean we cut our emotions off. It doesn't mean that we become distant. It actually means we can become more authentic, and we
Mm-hmm.
can we can allow others to be more authentic because we understand that we are different people. We also understand that we have different emotional journeys. So, I mean, it's so simple, but it's so profound and complicated too, right?
Yeah.
So basically what this says is that, Leanne, you can have your own emotional journey and I have my emotional journey. If I remember that differentiation, if I honor those boundaries, and really what you've talked a lot about are healthy boundaries or limits, and we honor those, that makes it so much easier for you to come to me if we're friends, to share what you're having a hard time with, and for me not to just absorb all of your emotions and anxiety, but to actually listen and
Yeah.
to give perspective if that's what you want,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when it comes to our families of origin or our children, and our spouses, that is so hard, really hard. But it can help a huge amount if we remember that. It's something we have to continually practice. And
Yeah.
then it goes back also to knowing the core values that we have, because that's what makes us different and distinct.
Beautiful. Yeah. The idea that somebody can share with you how they feel and that we don't feel the need to fix them or fix it is a big
Yeah,
deal. That is, to me, the definition of boundaries. Because we can
right.
have compassion, we can listen, we can care, and we can maybe even offer advice or, direction, but it is not our job to fix it. And that was
Yes.
the very nub of my anxiety, is I always thought it was my job to fix. And when you're inundated by people who seemingly need fixing, the overwhelm is immediate because I was
Yeah,
already overwhelmed. I was already taxed. And then
right.
somebody else would moan and groan or complain, and I was like, well, now I need to fix you too. So then the resentment, and then the no inner peace. No inner peace lives there.
Right,
Only like
right.
this idea. And it's interesting how much of that I realized was in my ego. I know we might go, to another philosophical thread here, but the ego is so interesting in that it believes it can fix things. And when I got back into the whole heart space and my intuition, it was like, okay, ego, you need to sit down because you've gotten us into a whole bunch of trouble here. And now we're not only resentful, but we're burned out and we can't even take care of ourselves because you think
Right.
it's our job to take care of everybody.
Right. Yes. And this is why healthy boundaries or healthy limits are so important. And not only are there so many needs coming at us, but there are a lot of people and a lot of organizations that don't have a healthy sense of boundaries. And they're always going to be pushing on us to breach what we are our healthy boundaries. Boundaries are basically limits that designate what we are and are not responsible for.
Yeah.
They apply to every piece of our lives, including emotional. And this is really key to understanding how we can make caregiving more sustainable, is when we really think about healthy emotional boundaries and we think about what are we responsible for, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for my mental health. I'm responsible for my emotions. I'm responsible for how I respond, how I react to different situations and scenarios. Those are my responsibilities. I might want my husband to take those responsibilities on, or my children.
Yeah.
And that's not very fair for them,
Yeah.
nor is it healthy, right? And those of us who tend towards caregiving, we are so willing to jump into other people's responsibility yards, and mow their lawn, fix the garden, pull out the weeds, and take care of what they need in order to be healthy and happy. But that's actually sends a really dangerous message, because when we start overdoing it for other people, we are sending the message, I don't really think you can handle it.
Yeah.
And that can be a very dangerous message, but it's also not sustainable, as you
Yeah.
pointed out. And so there's a very delicate balance between helping others and actually taking on their responsibilities, which is not the wisest, nor is it the healthiest.
Yes, yes, exactly. I think that we've talked about how to be aware that we need help and then how we can calm ourselves in the midst of maybe an emotional spin out. But for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this all actually begins with boundaries. This all actually begins at the very beginning so that we don't get to the spin out and we don't get to the part where we're ineffective because we're so overwhelmed. The boundaries for me have been the biggest game changer. The myth around boundaries for me is that it's just a saying no and that you're
Oh,
rejecting
yeah.
somebody's needs and it's selfish. But in fact, boundaries are not that at all.
No.
You've actually touched on it, and it has to do with values. And I'd love to hear more. Well, you tell me. You're the expert. You tell me.
Yeah, boundaries are actually necessary for healthy individuals, families, relationships, organizations. Boundaries and limits are often in place always for safety and well-being. And I have been in situations where my internal alarms are going off, right? But as a woman, I'm always like, oh no, don't overreact. And this is when I was much younger and I was in a professional scenario and my boss was saying inappropriate things. He rubbed my hand inappropriate. All these alarms are going off and I'm like, this is not, something inside me saying, this is not right. This is not right. That was back in a day where, and it still is, I think, hard to say no. Okay, this is an extreme example in a way, but no is honoring the boundaries. And we have to listen to these internal alarms that we have, because it most likely means that there's a boundary of ours that's being trespassed, that has been crossed. So boundaries, and again, it can be a social stereotype that is put on people. You can't say no, you can't turn someone down, and that is so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We can say no, we can say it very kindly, but we need to say it clearly, because relationships will not withstand constant breaching of boundaries, right? Let's say you started calling me at 2 a.m. every night because you had something that was so important that you needed help dealing with.
Yeah.
How long do you think I want to be your friend, Leanne?
About 3 nights. I'd give it 3 nights.
Right? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
boundaries, as you mentioned, are very important. They promote healthy way of living, healthy relationships, healthy and more effective organizations. The complicated part is knowing what boundaries need to be in place, especially if they have not been in place, and then putting them in place and honoring them can also be really difficult, because there's always going to be resistance to a change, and that includes new boundaries, even if it means a healthier future. But so we have to be discerning.
Yeah.
And my book and the work that I do helps people to figure out what boundaries do I need to put into place and honor? And we need to be determined to honor those because they will be challenged. People have a
Yeah,
hard time with change.
yeah, absolutely. And this is the challenge, particularly if you're caring for, say, a parent
Yes.
who has not taught you as their child to say no to
Yeah.
them, right? So you've got a
Yep.
built-in issue there of already a power dynamic with somebody who is not necessarily in power anymore, right? They are now the one being cared for, not the one caring for.
Yeah.
And so we've got a child, adult child, who's never been allowed to say, no, I don't want that in any kind of scenario, now calling the shots for their parent. And so an interesting exercise in my own life has been practicing setting a boundary with somebody who has no interest in me setting a boundary. It is perhaps one of the most difficult things I've had to learn how to do. And I would say that the key for me was to say it and then not explain it. It is so tough to say, that isn't right for me, or that may be true for you, but it's not true for me, or I'm not comfortable with that, or I'm not prepared to speak about that right now, but I'd love to hear about it later. Let me get into a better frame of mind, not right now. Like all of these things that are honoring our own well-being, but may not be convenient or the right time for the other person who's demanding attention or demanding a resolution in that moment. Can you speak about the practice of setting boundaries?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first place to start is to understand why boundaries are important, right? They benefit everybody involved, and that includes our parents and our children as well.
Mm-hmm.
To identify how those boundaries benefit everybody involved, and then to recognize also what happens when there's a lack of healthy boundaries. Think about the chaos that happens
Yeah.
and the lack of self-preservation that can happen. Once you have a clear understanding, or not a clear maybe, but solid understanding that boundaries are good and healthy, it's so much easier to determine what boundaries, and that would be another step. The next step then is to figure out, okay, where are the boundaries that are lacking and what do I need to put into place?
Yeah.
But then it's understanding and being creative about how am I going to communicate these boundaries. Sometimes we really need to be very concise and upfront and clear, like what you mentioned. And then we can come up with all kinds of creative, positive, or different ways of phrasing these boundaries because of the challenge. And people will just need to hear them over and over again. And that doesn't mean that we need to let go of those boundaries. It just means we have to be more determined to have them in place.
Yeah. I really
Right.
I really learned what you're talking about when I became a parent, because I understood that a child's behavior is a direct result of my clarity on what I'm willing to do or not do, or allow them to do and not do. So when I got clear about what my values were around certain behaviors, certain way we behave in certain places, the key was consistency. And it didn't
Yes.
mean that my children didn't push that to make sure my boundary was real, because that's what they're designed to do. We're all designed to make sure. We
Yeah.
always want to poke and make sure the boundary is real. So the consistency, and then in my adult life, I had to go, when I started doing that with other adults, not just my children, I had to go back to that practice of just, my kids are testing me to see if I'm serious. And I thought the same thing about the other adults I was trying to have boundaries with. They are testing me to see if I'm serious. And it was really interesting how the testing escalated sometimes in certain relationships. It escalated to like almost like intolerable and in frequency and in style of testing that. And then it gave. And then we had an understanding because they believed me. They believed me. But I couldn't have convinced them with words. I could not have convinced them with anything other than being consistent. And again, that is so hard to do because if we're people pleasers, like a lot of caregivers can be, a lot of times caregivers get into that role because we're the ones that are so eager to come in and help. And when we're
Yes.
eager to come in and help, typically we might have a problem with boundaries because we think that we just need to be there to fix it. But it's so interesting. That was my experience anyway, in terms of like holding steady on what was true for me and allowing them to have their experience around how I felt and being kind and compassionate and loving and understanding that this was an adjustment, but doing it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and you've gone all, we've gone circled back to anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Because that trying to establish or honor healthy boundaries, and when that's pushed, then that will bring up anxiety for the people that don't want those boundaries, which then translates back to us. So then it gets back to being able to increase our own inner calm, because if we can remain a non-anxious presence, and oh my gosh, that's so hard because our family of origin and our families we can trigger so quickly. But if we can increase our ability to be non-anxious and with our families, there's huge payoff in that. And so to be able to non-anxiously respond, but also to be, sometimes we can use humor. And if we can do it appropriate, you know, Mom, I hear you, for example, I understand, but right now I'm really wearing my own mom hat, helping one of the kids, and I will get back to you, you know, when I'm in a better space to be able to talk with you. If it's not an urgent need, most likely, and we should just be right up front and say this. I hear you. This is important to you. And it's important for me to help you. So I will call you, or we can talk, or we can deal with this at a later time when I am able to give you more of my mental attention, right? Or more of my attention and care.
And what I'm hearing when you say that in that scenario is not that you don't care about the other's needs, it's just that you care about your own as well. So it's
Or you,
not a you or me, it's a yes, you and me.
yeah, exactly. But it's also, I care about your needs enough to take the time to try to figure this out or to be in a good space. So it's communicating, it's about care of self, but also care of other. But we have to remember we're in a society of quick fix mentality. And not everything, a lot of things, in fact, there's not going to be a quick fix. And there might not even be a fix like what we want.
Yeah, that is part of the reality here is that we may be a caregiver to somebody who may never want that for us, may never want us to have that kind of say or that kind of self-care. So then we are seeking out support possibly then from elsewhere because there's nothing like dealing with the reality of a situation. We can hope all day that somebody comes around, but the reality may be that they won't. And so what is your best advice for that person who knows they have that person on their hands, you know?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many situations that can really beat on us, right?
Yeah.
That can really take a toll. And again, I go back to each one of us deserves the compassion and care that we give to others.
Yeah.
That is so important, and that we are human. Getting help, whatever that means, is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. And what we just have to do is be wise about what that help is. If it's talking to friends, to make sure those friends are people that we can trust, that know how to respond in a way that is nourishing for us, and that what we share is going to be kept in confidence. Getting professional help, whether it be with a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, or even a pastor, is again, it's wise. It is. It can save us a lot of internal pain,
Yeah.
and to do that with knowing that it's okay is really important. We do not need to be perfect. There is no such thing in today's world, especially when it comes to a caregiver, right? There's no such thing as a perfect caregiver in a perfect world. Um, so to let go of those kind of shaming concepts that we carry around is really important. It'd be so awesome if we could talk with each other and to share what's on our hearts and not be judged. But to also be able to really listen to each other and just to be there. Because sometimes there's no words that can fix what someone is suffering, our own or someone else's. It's just simply being present that speaks louder than anything else.
I love that. Beautiful. Being present. That is the gift, to be present. I really enjoyed this conversation. You have given us so much wisdom and so many things to think about and tools to use. Thank you for that. If anybody, if anybody wants to know more about your book or how they can get in touch with you, where can we find you?
Yeah, my book, Resilient and Sustainable Caring, is available on numerous internet booksellers, including Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And so if you just Googled my name and Resilient and Sustainable Caring, it would come up right away. Also, you can check my website. It's KarenSchuder.com. That can give you a link to the book and information about what I do, as well as blogs. And I am also on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So I do postings that are all about encouraging caregivers and helping to promote resilience and decrease anxiety, so to increase self-compassion, to deal with things like loss and conflict, but also to help others without absorbing all of their struggles and suffering.
So important. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for your time here today. We really, all of us listening, appreciate your wisdom and expertise in this. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. And again, thank you to all of you for the kindness and the care that you bring to the world. Our world doesn't always support it or confirm that it's important, but I want to remind you it is incredibly important for our world's survival. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Until next time.